So thank you all for coming. And before we start, I wanted to thank all of the leaders here, especially senior most Vaishnavas, Prabhupada disciples, Kalakanta Prabhu, Vishaka Prabhu. And so I wanted to also appreciate Chaupati devotees. Akinchan Krishna Prabhu is here, and he's just a participant, but because somehow there was a need for managerial support, he jumped into action, and so he fixed everything for us on time. So Chaupati devotees have amazing service attitude, always ready, expecting the unexpected, so I think we should give him a big hand. And so the topic of reputation in ISKCON is quite challenging and somewhat difficult, but there are many facets from which we can approach it. And before I start, I wanted to ask some of the expectations. Oops. Haribol. I wanted to ask few of you to share your expectations. What is ideally you would have as takeaway, you would want to have as takeaway from our session in here? Anyone wants to share your expectations? There is a microphone, please.
I believe you find the unique concept you may explore here. Because I already attended your seminar, that unique way you are always explaining, so that way I attended.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Please, help us microphone.
Hare Krishna. I just came from a seminar about youth.
Yes, I've been there with you. Yes.
I think that maybe ISKCON interpretation is not so good around with youth.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can share your ideas how we can agree.
Sure.
Interpretation.
Thank you. And Akinchan Krishna, can we turn it on? I see. Okay. All right. Anyone else wants to share your expectations, if you have any, or are you just curious how it is possible to address the subject? Okay. Let me then ask you, and it will be pretty hard to pass microphone effectively around, but I wanted all of you to participate. And let's, while the projectors have been prepared, we'll have some video shows, video clips connected to ISKCON's reputation. And so we'll be discussing the good, the bad, and the ugly as well. And before that happens, let's quickly share certain things connected to ISKCON's reputation. And again, it's important to make a distinction that reputation is something other people think of us, not what we think of ourselves, right? Reputation means we learn to look at ourselves through the eyes of the public, right? And so, if someone has Hare Krishna. If someone has that experience, if you could please share positive points. If anyone wants, just in one or two, as Navina Nirada Prabhu says, in one word or less, what are the positive points of our reputation? What ISKCON is famous for or known for in a good way?
Feeding people.
Listening to people?
Feeding.
Oh, feeding. Okay, yes. Food for life. Okay, brilliant. Anything else?
Basically teaching, we are teaching education about the spiritual.
Education.
Leading education in spiritual.
Okay, education. Kirtan, okay. Seminars, education, yeah, that was already mentioned.
ISKCON has a goodwill that it's a very genuine organization.
A genuine organization,
We are
okay.
teaching good values to the society.
Okay. Attention, Krishna Guru. Microphone.
They're known for their very huge, beautiful temples. In
Okay.
India, in India at least.
Huge, beautiful temples in India, very good.
Great festivals.
Oh,
Great
good.
festivals.
Great festivals.
Great festivals, okay. Anyone else? On your left, Prabhu, yeah.
In ISKCON, people have the idea that ISKCON they get tasty prasad.
Yes, we already mentioned food, prasadam, okay. Loud? Okay, microphone there.
ISKCON is the organization where it made realization to the people that it is not different from that Lord Krishna himself.
Okay, very good. Alright, so now we'll hear what is it appreciated within ISKCON by the world leaders, and hopefully our sound system. Is it working? No, it's not. Hare Krishna. So we'll watch a couple of video clips, and one will be very positive, and it is what the world leaders say about ISKCON. Alright, so it's movie time. Get your popcorn out.
Over the last 5 decades, the journey of ISKCON has been one of selfless service to society. The ISKCON family has emerged at the forefront of the quest to create a more peaceful, harmonious and compassionate society. ISKCON's journey has been a manifestation of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Integration has been at the core of your philosophy. ISKCON's story has been the story of the determination and devotion of lakhs of devotees spread across the world. Inspired by the teachings of Lord Krishna, they spread his message far and wide. The efforts of the ISKCON family in sectors like education, publishing and disaster relief are commendable. Narendra Modi, 8th August 2016.
Now we meet at a very special time. 50 years since His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, founded the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And what an extraordinary man he was. At the age of 70, he travelled by ship from India to Boston, suffering 2 heart attacks on the way. He arrived in America alone and penniless, but he created this global mission, travelling the world to spread his message. And look at it today, active in 100 countries, with 650 temples, centres, schools and colleges. And here's the best number of all, helping to serve 1.2 million free meals to poor children in India every single day. Let's hear it for those amazing achievements. For decades now, you've been putting your faith into practice beyond this temple. At home, serving free meals to the hungry and needy across London. and far away, helping those in utter desperation after the Nepal earthquake. So I look at what you've done in the last 50 years, and I think how much you can achieve in the next 50. Keep up the fantastic work. Keep telling us how you need to achieve inner peace before we achieve global peace. Keep up the fantastic work. Thank you very much indeed.
Jai Shri Krishna. It's impossible to fully describe the innumerable spiritual truths gifted to us by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I will attempt to highlight one key profound insight that I find to be so relevant and deeply needed in the world we live in today. Srila Prabhupada established unequivocally that real spiritual understanding, or real religion, transcends sectarianism, as we've seen so beautifully here tonight. A reporter once asked A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada if he found any conflict in drawing on the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, as well as Vedic scriptures in his teachings. And he replied, no, I don't find any conflict, because the ultimate goal is God. So you have to understand God and try to love him. Srila Prabhupada taught us this simple truth: just love God. Just love Krishna. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared on this planet 500 years ago and inaugurated this process of hearing and chanting the names of God, he didn't come to establish a new religion. He came to teach everyone that we can completely transcend sectarianism and achieve the perfection of religion simply by hearing and chanting the names of God in a humble state of mind. Srila Prabhupada doesn't say that there is a Christian God, a Hindu God, and a Muslim God. He doesn't say that we should call God Krishna and not Allah. God is one. He has many names which are based on his different qualities and different pastimes. We must realize and act on this fact if we want to transcend the fear and hatred that is rooted in sectarianism. Jai Shri Krishna. Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai.
And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on.
If anyone has noticed the progress of the ISKCON movement, he will simply be struck by the enormity of velocity with which the movement caught up. The founder, Acharya of this movement, Srila Prabhupada Ji, he started this movement at his mature age. Born in 1896, he established ISKCON in New York in 1966. During his lifetime, he contributed tremendously in spreading this culture, eternal message of humanity, which is the blessings, which is the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavad, teachings of Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. Message of Indian civilization is love, compassion, piety, sacrifice, renunciation.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Shri Krishna. Haribol. Haribol.
So, we're still in India, judging from how technology is working. But I think it's pretty clear, right, that all these leaders, they appreciate pretty much the same things you were mentioning: food, books, and community growth, temples, etc., etc. So now we're gonna go into the other part, and this clip is not actually the worst which you can find on the internet about ISKCON, but it's very short and it kind of encapsulates certain things which are known to the public and which are not the best kind of image we would want to have.
Most people these days have heard of Hare Krishnas, from their robed and shaved-headed adherents jumping up and down on the sidewalk with bells and drums to their free vegetarian food, but very few know their story and what they actually believe. The Hare Krishna cult, institutionally known as ISKCON, was founded in 1966 by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, otherwise known as Prabhupada. Prabhupada was a pharmacist from Calcutta with a wife and children until one day, in the mid-1900s, he decided to renounce his business and family to become a spiritual teacher and propagator of Hindu Vaishnavism. That is, based on the belief that God is a blue-skinned, flute-playing cowherd boy named Krishna, and the goal of life being to spend the rest of eternity intimately serving him in the spiritual world. The way to get to this spiritual world, you ask? By chanting Hare Krishna 1,728 times a day, minimum. In the mid-60s, the cult attracted herds of burnt-out hippies searching for spiritual enlightenment, alongside the likes of Beatle George Harrison and poet Allen Ginsberg. But what do they believe? Well, on the surface, the Hare Krishna doctrine seems strange but harmless, although on closer investigation, it is known that Prabhupada, the founder, was openly homophobic, racist, sexist, and even anti-science. The Hare Krishna's core beliefs are similar to Hinduism, as they are merely a branch of Vaishnava Hinduism. That being said, they believe in karma, reincarnation, astrology, and the existence of a countless amount of bizarre demigods and incarnations of Krishna, ranging from a half-man, half-lion, a fish, a boar, and a sword-wielding horse rider named Kalki that will kill the rest of civilization in years to come to make room for a new era. Sound like a particular doomsday cult? The actual movement started about 500 years ago with a Bengali man named Chaitanya, who amassed a large amount of followers in his village that believed him to literally be the incarnation of Krishna in this day and age. Chaitanya preached that the only way to Krishna is through reciting his name with love and performing devotional service. In the West, though, the Hare Krishnas have had their fair share of controversy. In 1977, when Prabhupada died, 11 of his male 20-something-year-old disciples took over, thus leading to drug and weapon trafficking, money laundering, sexual and emotional abuse, child abuse, suicides, and much more. Despite all of the turmoil within the cult and their bizarre beliefs, they continue to this day recruiting followers via means of meditation classes and tasty vegetarian feasts. For more videos, please subscribe.
Okay, so this is another perspective on the Hare Krishna movement. And so we can understand that our reputation can benefit from improvements. Anyone thinks that we need to improve in terms of our reputation? Okay. So, of course, we cannot change the past, even though we would love to. But I think we can change the future, thinking about it in the present, right now. And so, I mean, I'm sure that, you know, the things which were mentioned in the video, that's not even the comprehensive list. There are many more things. And if I ask you this question, what do you think is the major thing we could fix in our movement which would actually prevent the kind of troubles we faced in the past in the future? Okay, Shamananda Prabhu.
As you rightly said, the video which has highlighted the bad things about ISKCON is not even comprehensive. Reputation management works like a recipe. Like if you want halwa, you need farina, sugar, ghee, fire, pot, water. And then you do things one by one, step by step. In my observation, I'm not a scholar or a very intelligent person, but I have seen in Pepsi Cola, pesticide was discovered, a very high degree of pesticide in Pepsi Cola, or some worms were found in Cadbury's India's chocolates. And because these things happened in the last 8 years, I could see that these companies, first of all, they admitted this thing did happen. On their official website, in their official news bulletins, they said, yes, this has happened. Then they said, what are we going to do with that? And then they said, now things are fixed. There are 3 steps. So in one seminar with Devamada Prabhu, he is about the youth. So he's saying that now we are dealing with Gen Z, Generation Z, or Generation Z. So these youth, the first thing they want is, do you acknowledge that this thing happened? And what is the official declaration of what has happened? So that is step number 1. And then 2, 3 others will follow. So we don't have an official ISKCON website or a YouTube channel which tells, even before somebody has that scandal value, if somebody says, I heard about money laundering and this thing happening in ISKCON, they say, I heard much more from their official website. That takes the sting out of that particular job, and it adds a lot of legitimacy to the organization.
Okay, thank you.
They say the best way to stop people from finding out something about you is to tell them first.
Okay. Thank you. And so, Shamananda Prabhu explained to us, and this is one of the presidents of ISKCON Chowpatty, one of the senior most brahmacharis. And so, admitting, fixing, and reporting. These would be 3 steps. Admit the problems, to fix them, and report. Report what has been done. Okay, so that was good. And maybe someone could be a little bit more specific in terms of what is one thing which caused all the problems in the past. And here we have Vijay Prabhu. You want to share? Okay. So what is the one thing which caused so many problems in the past? And if that thing is fixed, then there is there is a guarantee that these kind of problems will not happen in future. Vijay Prabhu? Selfishness. Okay, get rid of selfishness. Navina Nirada Prabhu? Lack of training. Lack of transparency. Okay. And purity. Yes.
Accepting and putting a correction plan. Accepting and putting a corrective plan.
Okay, accepting and having a plan how to fix it, right? Yes. Actually, someone said transparency, right? And as we know from Bhagavatam, Dharma has 4 pillars, right? And what is the last pillar or last leg of Dharma? Truthfulness, yes. And so transparency is connected to truthfulness. And of course, as Shyamananda Prabhu said, to be truthful in retrospect, admit the faults, is a kind of, will be also appreciated. Okay, at least they admitted, they're truthful about their past, right? But we also understand that to really fix things, we need to be truthful about the present reality as well.
What would you say to the argument that we should not wash the dirty laundry in the public?
Okay, someone can say that we should not wash the dirty laundry in public.
Like when the child abuse case was going on,
Yeah.
the West was saying, tell everybody everything, because this will make it better.
Yeah.
Asia, especially India, was saying, don't admit to nothing.
Okay. Yeah,
Different mindsets.
Yeah, Western people say we have to admit everything, and Eastern people say, Asians, they say that we should not admit anything. Yes, I mean, that has to be discussed. How do we admit and account to, that will take some intelligent planning. But I would suggest one thing which actually contributed to, if not all, but to the vast majority of the problems. And that one thing can be expressed in one word. And this one word is isolation. Let me see how many of you would agree that our isolation from the public led to most of the problems. If you can please raise your hands. Okay. How many of you disagree? Okay, Shyamananda Prabhu. Okay. You want to comment?
No. I mean, I don't say isolation is the only thing. I'm saying
okay.
Among other factors it could
yeah.
be, but it's not.
Okay, there can be other factors beyond isolation.
You're taking money from people, whereas we isolate.
Yeah.
Can you explain about isolation?
Can we explain about isolation? Okay, so I spoke with one devotee who grew together with the movement, and probably many of you know him. That is Sri Prahlad Prabhu, a famous Kirtaniya and very successful preacher, and now he's a professor, lives in London, and he's teaching, and through his teaching he makes people interested and committed to Krishna consciousness, etc. So when we shared, he said he has seen the best times in ISKCON and the worst times in ISKCON. And the best times were when devotees were networking. Well, as we know, Srila Prabhupada was really struggling first, but then he bumped into the network of hippies and he started networking with them, and hippie movement was connected to the, famous bands, etc., etc. And then, the money started coming through hippie network, and then name and everything else started coming through hippie network to ISKCON. And then these were like really times when ISKCON flourished. And then when ISKCON became very powerful and big, and that happened after Prabhupada's departure, some of the leaders decided that we don't want to do anything to do with these dirty hippies. We are powerful on our own, and we have to cut all ties with them. And after that happened, the worst, the nightmares of ISKCON started happening. All the abuse and all kind of horror stories. And many of you know about these horror stories. And the movement was practically destroyed because there had been so much of bad publicity when we decided to stand on our own without any networking, without any openness to anyone else, and taking no support and not serving any community. And then the movement was practically destroyed, but luckily Hindu network came to the rescue. And of course we know for a fact that the Western world, ISKCON in the Western world is primarily and majorly supported by Indians coming from Hindu background, financially, service-wise, etc. And now there is another wave, which is to connect with yoga network, and that gives a lot of benefit to the society, a lot of credibility. So he said, I really appreciate the idea of networking, and I can see the problems with isolation. And whenever we talk about this, why isolation creates problems, and if we think about it, we don't have to struggle very hard to isolate ourselves, right? Because we talk completely different language, we have completely different lifestyle. Everything about us is so radically different, at least in the West, that unless we connect with people, people don't even know how to connect with us, right? And so that automatically creates isolation. And the problems of isolation are very well known to the family people. When husband and wife are in the public, they try to behave to their best. They try to show their best faces, right? But when husband and wife are behind the closed doors, we know what kind of things can happen and do happen, and unfortunately, ISKCON is also not an exception to those things, right? So this is what I've observed, because my experience, more than a decade of practicing mediations, conflict resolutions, that when devotees are exposed to the public, they try to behave to their best. But when they are not exposed to the public, then all kind of strange things are happening. I mean, I had very intense experience of two leaders fighting with each other, tooth and nail, for the who will be controlling the congregation. And both of them very successful preachers. And I was trying to mediate. I won't be telling place or names because it's confidential. And the case was totally hopeless. And both of them were invited to conduct series of radio programs before Janmashtami to speak about Krishna. And each of them said at the radio, inauguration, at the radio program inauguration event, they will expose each other's problems. They will, basically they threaten to fight in public. And then we were thinking that's going to be the worst nightmare. And the reason they wanted to do that, because they were thinking that only one of them will get the engagement. So they were trying to put another one down. Each was trying to put another one down to get the engagement. But luckily, they were informed that both of them will get it, get speaking engagements. And the whole conflict disappeared right there on the spot. They embraced each other, etc. So this is the thing that devotees tend to behave much better when they're exposed to the public than, when they are not. Vijay Prabhu. Okay. More microphones?
Yes, give everybody a microphone.
Give everyone a microphone. Okay, more prasadam. Yeah, I mean, we have this one, but, it doesn't work, so. Yes, Prabhu, I could pass microphone there.
Thank you, Maharaj. And another vision of the isolation is isolating ourselves from the law or the legal side. And what we have found in our community, should I say?
Well, probably better to keep it confidential.
So that if everybody is aware that if there's any impropriety, that they will have to go through due process of law, whether it's child abuse or spousal abuse or theft, whatever it is. And it makes a difference because in the past, we tried to fix things in-house. And that really speaks to the isolationism. That's how I was picturing it. And now it's that actually is a different level of transparency.
Okay. So this is Guru Gauranga Prabhu, very old, very senior Prabhupada disciple, and your name is?
Gopisha Das.
Huh?
Gopisha.
Gopisha, sorry, yeah, and he's helping with very important issue. So, somebody else wanted to make a comment? Okay. So yes, isolation from law and order naturally creates chaos and lawlessness, and I think that kind of trap we fell in more than once in our society. So, anyway, let me see if we are okay with that part, or someone still has doubts that isolation may not be the only reason, but it's one of the serious reasons for the troubles we faced. So everyone's supporting that idea that we got to come out of the isolation one way or the other. And yes, some questions?
How does the isolation, the problem already occurred? Isolation means it will resolve the problem or minimize the problem, or if the problem itself will not happen. What does it mean, isolation?
What does isolation mean? So I can try to give a definition, even though there can be many definitions. Isolation means I'm a pure devotee. I don't need to serve anyone because I am Krishna's representative, empowered representative. The entire planet has to serve me. And so there are some other people next to me who also claim to be Krishna's representatives, and they don't understand that I'm the genuine one and they are not. So that kind of competition, that's very typical for religious organizations. I mean, I also have experience of interfaith and religious leaders. They always fight with each other who will be representing God better, right? And so that kind of, distorted perception of oneself, which results from not being exposed to, I mean, I can give you a very simple example. For example, what will happen in the room if you totally isolate it from the light of the sun? What will be happening with this room? The mold will grow on the walls, right? And the spiders will be, putting their webs everywhere. And so what will happen to the room if it is exposed to the sunlight all the time? Yeah, it will be, what you call it? Prabhupada was calling it antiseptic, right? That the sunlight has that property of destroying all the germs. So this is what we're talking about in terms of isolation. That we are the bosses and masters on our own, and the only person we are accountable to is Krishna and maybe Guru, and that's it, right? But Guru is somewhere very far away, and he's giving me blessings for whatever I'm doing anyway. So it's really only Krishna, but Krishna doesn't mind whatever I do.
You were saying that that kind of mentality is individual mentality, or is the ISKCON mentality regarding to another religious organization?
It can be directed towards other religious organizations, but it can be directed towards anyone. And really what we are talking about is the 4th verse of the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which is arrogance, which is one of the very prominent demoniac qualities, and we can understand arrogance or having, too high opinion of ourselves. That often leads to problems. And this kind of high opinion, if I'm a senior devotee in ISKCON, nobody dares to tell me anything, right? Because, the juniors, they might be careful about saying anything, and seniors, they might not know, or they might, think, okay, how do I deal with this guy? It's a difficult case. So basically, religious setup is designed that people on the top, they're completely lonely and pretty much unaccountable to anybody. I mean, now there are certain attempts to create the accountability system, so we'll see how that will go. But Mahaprabhu?
Jai Krishna.
Jai
now
Krishna,
the line of
sorry.
thought would be maturity. You could say that the mature religious movement is actually handling the situation that we're not isolated. And if you're mature, then you practically are able to network, to connect, interface, whatever, to the government and so on. And this would be another line of thought in parallel to that isolation theory.
Yeah, definitely. And there is one thing Srila Prabhupada was very much interested in seeing happening, and this is one thing which is not really happening very much in our movement. And he speaks about this in a number of places in his books, and of course, as we know from his example, he made a number of attempts to implement that principle in practice. And so this is, you can note the quote from the Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 17, verse 45, and that's the very end of the purport. I'll just read a couple of sentences, and it says, without state support, state means government, without state support, no doctrines or philosophy or religious principles can progressively advance. There should be complete cooperation between the Brahmanas and the Kshatriyas for this common good. Even up to Maharaj Ashoka, the same spirit was prevailing. Lord Buddha was sufficiently supported by King Ashoka, and thus his particular cult of knowledge was spread all over the world. I mean, cooperation with the state authorities, that kind of happening in some places, even though not in all places. But from what I know, the major reason why devotees go to the government officials is to help them with what they need. Okay, we need permission for the festival, for Ratha Yatra, for Harinam, for book distribution, for something, right? Because we are the Brahmanas, they are the Kshatriyas, they're supposed to serve us because we are the great saints, right? And yeah, but even that is not really happening much. And we know for a fact when we're in trouble, then we go to legal authorities and they're helping us to sort out the trouble. But just imagine the situation that we are in touch with them on regular basis, how much the risk of getting in trouble will be eliminated. And yesterday we've done this kind of presentation, and one Prabhupada disciple, Sri Kama Mataji, she said the best example of working together with officials is UK and London, because one of the clips you've seen, that is from Bhaktivedanta Manor, former Prime Minister David Cameron, David Cameron, and so he appreciated ISKCON not because we are any religious organization, but because ISKCON is perceived in there as representatives of Hindu community. So someone in UK went through the trouble to network with all Hindu organizations, and then they said, okay, you be our representatives of Hinduism in the country. And suddenly, from tiny, small religious organizations, we became representatives of all the Hindus in the country, which is 5% of the population, and pretty significant 5%. And because of that, when we wanted to have public schools in which we could teach Krishna consciousness, we could claim that we're going to be teaching Hinduism, and now we have a number of Avanti schools in which children are learning Mridanga Karatals, Vaishnava philosophy, and so Vaishnava culture. In the center of the school there are deities, and government is paying for everything. So there is huge benefit which could be derived if we change our mentality from being the lords and masters of the planet into the mentality of being servants of the public and working with other servants who are also trying to do something for the public, and seeing if we can work with them together on an ongoing basis. So this is what I see, and UK doesn't suffer from many problems which are there in other places. Prabhu?
Even in India, we see that Akshay Patram in the Bangalore temple, and we also as ISKCON, when we are distributing food, especially participating in the maintaining project, that gives us quite a good leverage and participation and helps us. So similar projects, if we can increase, then maybe it may help us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, brother.
Thank you, Maharaj. Speaking to the arrogance again, there's, at least I remember early on in the movement, going back to early 70s and all, the idea that, okay, we're Krishna servants and therefore everything is due us. We have an entitlement mentality. And which led to stealing gas at the gas stations and foodstuffs and or how can I get over or get by or get on the dole or take government assistance like that rather than being contributors, just being takers. And changing that mentality, I believe, is also a critical part, which is what you're just getting into the detail of what you're speaking about, that we're here to be servants. And there was a situation where somebody had taken something, and Sankirtan devotees were saying, well, Prabhupada, it all belongs to Krishna, right? And Prabhupada's response was yes, but he did not give it all to you.
That's good. Thank you, Prabhu. Yes, that actually, I'm speaking from personal experience and also seeing what's happening in other communities. One part of my service is quite active interfaith networking, not just talking to them, but actually working with them. And one serious lesson I've learned from Imam of Ahmadiyya Mosque, and as many of you know, Ahmadiyyas, they are the most hated Muslim community on the planet by other Muslims. Why? Because they dare to say that Muhammad is an important prophet, but he is not the first and not the last prophet. And they also respect Krishna. And so, because they dare to challenge Muhammad's, supremacy in that sense, every single Muslim belonging to other community, hates them, and they getting even killed. And so we spoke with one of these imams in London, and they have very big mosque. And I asked him, so are you suffering from persecution here in UK? He said, yes, very much so, and even one of our members have been killed lately, even in UK. And when he spoke about all the horrors they have to go through, I was thinking, this must be very small and highly prosecuted group. And I just asked them, so is this the only mosque in London? And he said, no, we have about 15. I said, is this your headquarters? He said, no, this is the smallest. We only have 3,000 people in our congregation. And I said, any other mosques in UK? He said, yes, nobody knows exactly, but something close to 60. They don't even count. They don't care to count, right? Because they grow exponentially. And I said, how do you grow? He said, we just go out and on the street, we distribute our literature, we talk to people, and we convert them. So this is how they grow. And I was wondering, how come that they are so badly prosecuted and they grow so fast? And then while talking to him, he's very humble man. He said, even though I'm from Pakistan, but I was born in UK, and I love this country because this country gave me everything. And I want to give back to my country. I think my service to Allah is also to serve my country. And I'm encouraging my entire congregation to be very active in all social events. So it's like they are totally not isolated from the public, and they are in the mood of service. And I figured out this is the secret of their success. Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you very much for this point on isolation. My question is, for example, if there is something that someone misbehaves within our organization, then how to separate that? Because it's human nature to have this, it's not, so how to separate that this individual misbehaved in the organization, and it's not the whole organization that gets its reputation tainted because of one individual. How to kind of separate it?
So how to isolate grain from the husk, how not to be accountable for the nonsense some people do, and of course ISKCON's doors are wide open, and many people who come and they want to be part of the movement, I mean, they might have serious psychological issues also, and so that reflects in their behavior and what results from that. So actually, one thing which one of my friends noted from being part of the larger management, he said, it's amazing, every time we come together and we face a problem, everybody is trying to figure out how to deal with this problem, as if this problem happened to us for the first time in the history of mankind, and nobody else ever had this problem in the universe, right? Because we're unique, right? And so everything, what's happening in our life is completely unique. And so devotee is trying to reinvent the wheel every single time without looking at, what is defined as sharing the best practices. Maybe these kind of problems other religious organizations had, and believe me, again, from exposure to interfaith, I know that all religious organizations, pretty much, they go through the same trash, through the same problems, right? And so if we would just open our minds up and stop reinventing the wheel and stop thinking we're so unique that even the problems happening to us never happened to anyone, we could easily, there are solutions for everything, believe me. And so if we use those solutions, then we can easily sort these problems out. And again, there are control systems which already exist, and we don't have to put them in place for ourselves. It's much easier, for example, to buy some device than to create it on your own. So that's kind of common sense, and Prabhupada said 90% of Krishna consciousness is common sense, but sometimes it looks like it's the other way around. So yeah, and again, if we're open to those people whose service is to control what's happening with the public, including religious organizations, if we work with them, they could help us to sort it out, whatever is happening, in very efficient way, and no one will hold us accountable. No one will, blame our organizations for cover-ups. So the problems of the individual attributed to the problems of organization because of cover-ups. Again, isolation. All right, so let me get some feedback if you got anything of a value from this short session. If you could please share that. If you've learned something new or useful while being here, you could share that. No one learned anything. Okay.
It definitely inspired me, and in at least my yatra, to go out and reach out to other communities, and not just stay in our morning programs, evening programs, but at least a couple of times a month, or at least once a month, to go out and connect with other communities.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That actually was the main thing I wanted everyone to pick up from this and our session.
Yes, thank you very much, Maharaj. Amazing. Yes, we have to learn to be normal again.
All right, so thank you. Officially our time is over, but if anyone wants to ask or say anything, we can spend a few more minutes.
I think of things in Laguna Beach because it's a small town. generally the city doesn't like to be bothered. But I thought of a good thing. On Kadasi, I go to the top of this mountain to chant lots of rounds, and I found the cigarette butts by the bushes. So at the city council meeting, most people ask for favors for themselves. I said, when I go up twice a month to do my chanting, I noticed the droppings of an animal more dangerous than the mountain lion. So they all have to, what's more dangerous? I said, well, mountain lion eats one person, but the cigarette could burn the whole town. Like in 1993, it burned 600 homes. And they said, oh, they like that one because I didn't ask for something for myself, I asked for a city benefit. And then what I did is I go up hunting on the hill, I find the people smoking and call the number, and they get a $1,000 fine because they can burn the whole town down.
Wow.
So you think of something that's a benefit to them instead of going to ask for something.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu. Actually, I had, my early realization on the point that if you connect to those people whose position is to serve the larger community, it gives tremendous benefit. I mean, we were doing communications in the place where I was in charge of, and one person we developed very close ties with was assistant mayor, and he was coming to our festivals, etc., and he really appreciated us. And one time I've decided, okay, let me see if instead of asking favors from him, I could really engage him in the service. And so we brought a mission of our community to him. I just wanted to have his feedback. And, he said, what can I do for you? And I told him, actually, we're not here asking anyone for any favors because what we do is not for us. We do it for the public, but your position is you know what the public needs and what the public wants, and so we want you to advise us what is the best thing we can do. And he said, how do I know I'm not a Hare Krishna? I said, this is our mission, and please read it. And it was written in a very simple language, understandable language, even for laymen, without any difficult terms, education festival and other things. And when he read it, he said, yeah, sure. If you are doing these things, I can make you part of every major city festival. You'll be in the center of the festival. You'll have exposure to thousands of people, which did happen. And then he said, your food is also very nice, and I want you to teach millions of people how to cook your kind of food. So we'll give you time slot at the local TV, so you can conduct your cooking courses there. And your books are also very interesting and very deep. Unfortunately, some people cannot afford it, so let us think of the ways to subsidize your book distribution. And I was thinking that would never, ever on the planet happen if I would go and ask him. But because I asked for advice, he gave more than I could imagine. And so, remembering the famous saying from great grandfather of our Ambarish Prabhu, Henry Ford, he said, ask someone for money, get advice. Ask someone for advice, get money. Money means benefit, right? So that was my experience. And, it's like so much benefit can result from actually serving together with those whom Krishna gave that position of service in the society. And instead of being envious of them, if we work with them, that can result in, greater benefits that we can ever imagine. All right, so thank you all very much. We'll stop here, and if there are any other comments or questions, we can discuss that individually. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.